this weird feeling.
How you doing?
The plane can explode! It's not a joke! It's not a joke!
We get thrown off the plane all because Brownie has a bad dream?
I saw it.
The plane! It's gonna blow up! It's gonna blow up!
The recent release of Final Destination Bloodlines pushed the franchise back to the forefront of pop culture. Letterboxd has been full of users rewatching the first 5 films in preparation for seeing the new release. And it girl Charlie XCX even took to TikTok to discuss her dreams for a future Final Destination film.
The reason I love these movies is that they really just are about hot people getting killed. And so I was thinking, well, shouldn't there be a sort of it girl version of this franchise?
As someone who missed out on this franchise's heyday, I was far too young to be allowed into the cinema to see any of the first 5 films. This hype has been pretty exciting to take part in. For me, and seemingly many other people, this franchise is one of the defining ones of our early introduction to horror movies. Whether you watched one of the films at a sleepover, or simply experienced one of the horrifying opening disasters on a clickbait YouTube video, most people within my generation had exposure to this franchise at a pretty young age. For some, this kind of exposure may have scarred them for life. But for those like me who have grown up to be huge horror fans, we likely all now look back on this time with fond memories. And today, I'd actually consider Final Destination to be one of my main comfort franchises. This might sound odd to some, but I'm sure many people will be nodding in agreement, as this is not a rare statement. And so, with that said, I wanted to explore exactly why and how these films provide so many of us with comfort. In times of stress or sadness, people tend to turn to escapist entertainment. For some people, this is romance, for some, it's comedy, and for others, it's watching people be brutally murdered. Horror has long provided comfort for many people, and studies suggest this is because the genre gives audiences a fictional place to put their real feelings of anxiety. This makes for a pretty effective distraction. Sort of an if we don't laugh, we'll cry kind of thing. If we don't feel anxious about fiction, we'll feel anxious about real life. And I know which I'd choose. But not all horror films are created equal. They all serve slightly different purposes. In the past decade or so, our cinemas have been dominated by what many refer to as elevated horror. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. I do not like this term. Probably not a shock for the kind of horror fan who will happily declare that she loves the Final Destination franchise. This term seems to imply that modern horror is far more psychologically deep and far more engaged with socio-political themes than the genre has ever been before. But I personally think that critics who like to use this term are just outing themselves as having very little experience with the genre. Horror has always served to probe social and psychological fears. Horror has always been complex. Now don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of these supposedly elevated films, and get how off the back of the 2000s dominance of more grisly horror films, Get Out, Hereditary, The Babadook and the like may have felt refreshing. But films with such realism are in the grand scheme of things nothing new. What about Candyman, The Thing, The Exorcist or The Shining? Plus, to suggest these films are more engaged with socio-political themes than horror has ever been before is simply wrong. Even the Saw franchise, which is commonly dismissed as torture porn, did not come from nowhere. It was born out of the post-9/11 distrust of institutional justice and the overexposure to real graphic violence online and in the news. It was this exact same fear that also created the Hostel franchise.
Right now, nothing scares me more than those videos on the internet of Al-Qaeda terrorists decapitating people.
Slasher films such as Halloween were engaging with the fear of violence intruding on seemingly safe environments, like suburban neighborhoods. To suggest that gore films or slasher films are all kills and no substance is just ignorance. But they are different. In all honesty, I think we may currently be experiencing a bit of so-called elevated horror fatigue. For me, these films serve a very different purpose, due to their on-the-nose portrayal of more serious themes. Slasher and gore films, on the other hand, the films I think this supposedly new subgenre has been held up against, are able to be a bit more escapist. Not all empty-headed nonsense as some like to suggest, but they are far more symbolic with their seriousness. Just because you can analyse these films in a very serious manner does not take away from the genre codes they package their messages within. It's this lack of understanding and ignorance to the language of horror films that often gets them looked down upon. But for me, it's this that allows them to serve a dual purpose. Hereditary is hard to watch in any way but as a commentary on grief. Get Out is impossible to remove from real-life racism, but slasher films can just be fun kills. They don't force us to question who is being killed and why, even though I think we should. When putting on a slasher film, we know what to expect. All but the final girl will die. Thus, there's no need to root for anything different. Instead, we kinda just root for whatever gets us from A to B to be well done. With this, there is safety in a formulaic structure. And what franchise is more formulaic than Final Destination? This is one of the key reasons that I think the Final Destination films are the perfect candidates for escapist horror. With their formulaic structure, a vision of tragedy, tragedy avoided for some, an inevitable death coming to complete the fate of those who avoided it earlier, the Final Destination films don't keep us too on our toes. Sure, there might be that one more simple, jump scare-like death, but even this is part of the formula. This makes them a pretty safe franchise to watch. You kind of sign a contract of what to expect when you press play. But still, can watching death really be comforting? Well, yes. Final Destination, and most slasher films for that matter, are death without grief. Sure, we may see a few funeral scenes throughout the franchise, but there's no dwelling here. Compare that to, spoiler alert for Hereditary, the grief scenes after Charlie dies, wherein we witness a harrowing and very realistic portrayal of grief.
Okay, so fine, then say what you want to say then.
Peter.
I don't want to say anything. I've tried saying
Okay, so
things.
try again, release yourself.
Oh, release you mean?
Yeah, fine, release me, just say it. Just fucking say it.
Don't you swear at me, you little shit! Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother! Do you understand?
Add to this the typical lack of character development in Final Destination, and it becomes hard to root for survival of characters who simply don't feel that real, and much easier to root for creative deaths. Thanks to this, there's little emotional toll taken in watching the Final Destination films. As mentioned, a similar effect is created in most slasher films, but I think the lack of a malicious killer and mere fate in its place is an important difference here. The dichotomy of good and evil feels pretty removed from Final Destination. There's not even a need to root for the bad guy to see the death, so there's no need to question our own morality in that sense. But we are still rooting to see some pretty horrific deaths, so where is the comfort here? Even griefless, fated death may seem strange to find comfort in, so why on earth do we? Well, death is inevitable for all of us.
I'll see you soon.
Some people are able to forget this fact pretty easily, but others feel it as an ever-present fact that they must simply find a way to live with. Those who ignore may not want reminders of death, and thus might take comfort in other, more death-lacking genres. But those who are always aware may want, again, somewhere to put these thoughts, a focus on the fictional rather than the real. And Final Destination plays on what I want to call the jigsaw effect, in reference of course to Saw.
You see, the knowledge of death changes everything. If I were to tell you the exact date and time of your own death, it would shatter your world completely. Those who don't appreciate life do not deserve life.
Saw is another formulaic franchise, and another common comfort franchise for many similar reasons. Although its slightly more gory brutality is one of the reasons I think it's not so effective in being pure comfort. Jigsaw, the killer in Saw, has a very clear manifesto. He wants to place those who do not appreciate life in near-death situations to show them just how badly they really do want to live. In this, he always makes escape a possibility. Well, at least he claims to. There's lots of debate surrounding the escapability of certain traps, but still, that is what's claimed. Final Destination may not give those in the films themselves a similar means of escape. Any hope is usually false and everyone is typically dead by the end. But for us in the audience, there is of course an escape. Final Destination reminds us that death is all around us, but often not in the ways that feel most terrifying to us. In real life, death's most scary form is usually illness. But when a log truck accident, washing line strangulation, or God forbid a lawnmower-propelled rock could be just around the corner, why spend your whole life worrying? Final Destination reminds us we are constantly escaping death, so why not just appreciate life and stop worrying? For me at least, it reminds me to relinquish control.
What you have to realize is that we're all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail. Every single move we make, from the mundane to the monumental, the red light that we stop at or run, the people we have sex with or won't with us, the airplanes that we ride or walk out of, the It's all part of death's sadistic design, leading to the grave.
Another important thing I've just touched on is the nature of the deaths in Final Destination. For the most part, they are pretty absurd. Never too brutal, like I mentioned with Saw, these aren't even deaths that I really think you feel the pain of. In fact, I personally think that they harken back to slapstick comedy scenes more than gory horror. The Final Destination films created their own film language, using the camera to play with our expectations and characters' final moments. We are almost always shown a variety of mundane dangers, most of which play no role in the death. In the end, the deaths are often so ridiculous they are hard to take seriously. Although the tone of the first film is more serious, this humour becomes more and more lent into as the franchise progresses. In fact, I think Bloodlines is by far the most self-aware of this humour. Sure, the kills are always grounded in real scenarios, and yeah, apparently all possible, but they are turned into such a spectacle that they feel much more like Charlie Chaplin falling down a flight of stairs than Dr. Gordon sawing off his own foot. In Final Destination, death becomes a bit ludicrous. Existential anxieties are removed, and all that is left are some good practical effects, and sometimes some pretty bad CGI ones, and a little bit of slapstick comedy. Sure, some may accuse the franchise of terrifying a generation of various accidents, but for many horror fans, they simply remind us to tread a bit more carefully and take every day as it comes. Who knows how and when we will go? In relinquishing control, for many people, there is great comfort to be found.
In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes.
So-called elevated horror films may be important for discussing serious issues, or they may force us to take a deep look at our own handling of far more deep-rooted feelings. I know that for me personally, experiencing the fictional grief of Hereditary has forced me to then engage with my own very real grief. It's like crying at something fictional and then realising this isn't what you're crying about at all. Instead, it's something much deeper and far more real. But there is little escapism in this kind of horror. In fact, I'd say it's the exact opposite. Yet Final Destination is able to prevail and provide many that much needed escape. It strikes a perfect balance of distracting our anxieties, but not pulling them too close to the surface. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this subject. Let me know, does Final Destination work as a comfort franchise for you? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And what is? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out my previous video all about the vampire as love interest.